If you're fascinated by the exploding field of VR and AR, you need to tune in. UMverse Podcast is your gateway to XR wonders. Hosted by Tom Merrick from the University of Miami, we chat with top experts in VR and AR. Discover how this groundbreaking tech is reshaping industries and our everyday lives. Whether you're a pro or just curious, UMverse Podcast makes XR fun and easy to understand. Subscribe now and step into the future with us.
Hello and welcome to the UMverse Podcast, where we explore the exciting world of XR technologies. I'm Tom Merrick, Associate Director of VR and AR Initiatives here at the University of Miami. On this show, we connect with innovators from both the university and industry who specialize in the development, teaching, and promotion of extended reality and AI. Whether it's groundbreaking applications or immersive learning experiences, we dive into how XR is shaping the future of education and beyond. So thank you all for joining us, so let's get started. On today's episode of UMverse, we're thrilled to have Dr. Gisela Ricoeur, an ophthalmologist and digital health specialist. As the executive director of virtual care at Boston Palmer Eye Institute, the country's #1 eye hospital, Gigi, as she's known in intimate circles, is a trailblazer in telemedicine, having founded the first international chapter of the American Telemedicine Association in 2003, I believe. With a focus on VR and AR technologies. She's shaping the future of virtual healthcare. Thank you so much for joining us as we explore your innovative work and vision for digital health.
Thank you, Tom. It's really wonderful to be here and being able to be part of this, kind of like being ambassadors and advocates for not only telehealth specifically. Now we're kind of like doing a deep dive into what medical extended reality is also allowing us, right, to be able to impact our patients' outcomes as well as their experience overall. So I think these are very exciting times to be here. Yes.
That's great. Thanks so much. So I always talk about you as a pioneer, and listen, you're a pioneer in what we're doing. You're actually a pioneer for this podcast, as you were my first official guest. So thank you so much for being here. When we talk about pioneering, I'm diving right in here. So you've played a significant role in the development of telemedicine, especially ophthalmology. So one of my questions is, what initially drew you to the intersection of healthcare and digital technology? What brought you to Boston Palmer, and how do you see virtual healthcare evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Wow. So that takes me.
I know that's a mouthful. I apologize.
No, that takes me back to the 90s. So I was a resident in ophthalmology, and internet was made available to all of us as citizens, right? Because internet has been around for many years, but at the beginning it was only for the government, higher education institutions and so forth. But it wasn't like commercially available or readily available. And as healthcare institutions, at least in Argentina, where I was at that point in time, it was made available to us in 1996 to be exact. And so I had my first class there, and I trained for the very first time in what we called medical internet. That's what it was called back then in those days. And it just blew my mind away. I mean, I could literally just access any type of information from a medical perspective, I'm talking, right? Because I was a resident, trying to figure out, finding new things for my patients, how to understand better, how to learn better. And I could just access it wherever I was, right? So whether I was at home on the computer at home, or whether I was in the hospital in the computer at the nurse's station or whatever, you could access information on demand. That blew away my mind. And from then on, it has been a roller coaster ride of up and downs and trying out new technologies and trying to see how we can incorporate them. 25 years passed by and we got this huge pandemic, right? So COVID became part of our lives, our reality. And that made everybody, not just us, but everybody have to do a very deep dive into being virtual, right? And some people had never even thought about it. We already had telemedicine programs, because I obviously, since I was very much interested in this, I developed telemedicine programs where we were working at that time. But the fact was that I had to start helping out colleagues, because many of them started calling me, hey, you've been doing telemedicine for so many years. How do we do this? Because we just don't know how to communicate with our patients. At that point, we're talking about March 2020. We weren't saying, how can we diagnose? How can we treat? how can we communicate with our patients? So I started to give webinars on how to be able to develop interpersonal communication skills, how to develop empathy, how to be able to bond through video, and then obviously what were the tricks and the pearls to do in teleophthalmology. And I came on Bascom Palmer's radar, and that's how I got into Bascom Palmer. I confess that I was blessed to be able to be Dr. Alfonso, who is the chairman for Bascom Palmer. I was his observer in 1997. So Bascom Palmer has always been a beacon for those ophthalmologists in Latin America, and I would say in the worldwide too. And so when they called me, I was like, wow, what a chance, right? So to be able to take all my experience and expertise back to a point where, like you just said, right, it's a very, very huge, important hospital that also needed to be able to vamp up and expand, I would say, their virtual services. So I said great. Yes, and
that's wonderful. So as for those of us who know you, you have somehow an undying wealth of energy, and it takes this energy to keep these things going. So when you look at your work as the executive director of virtual care at Bascom Palmer. So how would you say you've been able to, since we're talking a lot about the XR technologies, how have you been able to leverage VR and AR technologies? And have you seen the technology enhance patient outcomes? Or do you have any quick examples, like breakthrough moments where these tools made real impacts?
So I'm going to be completely honest with you right now. Everything that we've been doing for the past 2.5 years at Bascom Palmer, right, have been strictly focused on VR. We're actually going to start thinking about medical extended and blending in AR as we work and move forward this next academic year. But so far, we've been really focusing on virtual reality. And I had the chance to see it in both scenarios, in both worlds, in the clinical world and in the educational world. So if I think about education, we can start there first. I created Bascom Palmer's digital twin. So what I was trying to do was to develop a new environment where we could train, where we can learn and have a more engaging, even a funner experience. But because we're trying to change the paradigms, right? So virtual care, medical extended reality is actually pushing us in another direction from an experiential, I would say, perspective. So we're living, we're experimenting, we're experiencing different sensations because that's what virtual reality really gives you. The possibility of maybe listening to the same lecture you would be doing in a conference room or in an auditorium, but immersed in another reality with other elements that make it so much more, in my opinion, engaging. So that's from an educational perspective, and we can go into that a bit more granular if you want. But then if I'm looking at it from a clinical perspective, and we're talking about patient outcomes and so forth, we're also leveraging this technology in order to be able to screen and to test patients better. So if you want an aha moment, for example, we're talking about portable technology that is actually, let's just say, competing against our gold standard technology, which are huge, very space consuming. Tests are usually tedious in some cases. They take many minutes each per eye. Patients have to be in special positions in the sense that they have to be kind of like staring at within the device, staring at the fixation, like for a long time, almost 20 minutes if we're taking, depending on the test, right? And if we're talking about both eyes. And now all of a sudden, I'm able to take this portable, lightweight device to the bedside, right? So for those patients that they're admitted, that are hospitalized, that need quick decisions to be made on their visual loss, for example, idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Sounds weird, right? Complicated, but basically your pressure inside your head is actually growing, and you're losing vision, and it's also risky for your life. And you have to make decisions, and you can't take that patient and put them in a standard automatic perimeter. You need to do something right there and then. And all this technology involves being able to be where the patient needs us to be. So VR, that was one of my aha moments, right? So I can actually change the environment, and I'm changing the experience. We're also doing comprehensive eye tests with VR technologies, and patients really love it because, once again, it's lightweight, it's portable, they're sitting, they're comfortable, and they have these virtual assistants. In some cases, they're avatars, and others, they're voices, but they're guiding them through exactly all the tests. So from a patient perspective, I think it's a win-win situation. And then if I look at it with my healthcare administrator hat on, it also makes sense for the institutions. We don't need so much retail space or footprints in order to have all this technology. We downscale the amount of highly skilled technicians that they can keep on working at the top of the scope of their practice with the patients and other things. And these things that we really don't need the skilled people just to be able to do, we just let the technology do it. Most of the technology is still, I would say, part of it, or large part of it still under research, but there's already literature published, peer-reviewed literature. Research is already making, I would say, landfall. We're already seeing the results, and they're reliable, they're precise, they're reproducible, or you can reproduce these. And so I think, I wouldn't say it's a gold standard today, but it will soon be.
Listen, you've touched on it. This is great because, and you sort of touched on this without saying it, like we talked a little bit about, and it's come up a lot in healthcare, just these hybrid care models.
Yes.
And I wonder, if you could talk a little bit about the hybrid care models combining in-person and virtual care, which you've sort of touched on, but what the key and some of those key advantages that you've seen in ophthalmology from the hybrid approach, especially in patient engagement, I would say.
So from an ophthalmology perspective, we are heavily dependent on imaging. Everything that we do, or mostly everything we do, requires some type of imagery. And again, that means we're heavily dependent on equipment. So patients may spend, because obviously they're coming to Bascom Plumber, they're looking for a solution to their concerns, to their eye conditions. And so we have the one-stop shop, I think it's called in English, in the fact that you can go to Bascom Plumber, you can get any type of imaging that you actually need, and you see the top specialists there, the top experts, and then you go home with everything kind of like your plan, your assessment, everything done. But that also takes time, and sometimes you just don't have that time. So what if I can have you come in an expedited manner, just get your imaging done and everything, and we decouple the usual ophthalmic visit. And then you go home, and from the convenience of your home or maybe even your work, you are able just to talk to your physician and just focus on those results, just focus on what that physician thinks is the best for you. So you've optimized your time as a patient because you're in and out for what you really need to be inside. And then all that waiting time, all the transfer. I have a dear colleague that calls it sometimes slippage because there's so many handoffs in the system, right? But you're at home now and you have all the time in the world, and you agree, obviously, there's an appointment set up. So the physician also has all the time in the world within, obviously, that appointment time to be just with you and just take care of you with that. I think
great.
Experience as a patient, I opt for that. That's what I'm looking for, right? And from, a healthcare perspective, we have the patients inside that really need to be inside because there's no other way to see them. Telemedicine isn't going to replace in-person care. Telehealth isn't going to replace us, nor is AI. But it's surely helping us increase our accessibility.
That's great. You mentioned a couple of colleagues that dear colleagues, people you've worked with. So I wondered if you'd like to just mention a few of your colleagues, doctors, and just friends that have sort of influenced you along the way or have made real impacts in your life and your as it relates to just both from a professional but also just a general well-being perspective.
So it's been a long journey, right? And I've been blessed to meet so many people that I consider them all my mentors. I mean, I think my network is such a rich network that, I don't know, it's been so blessing. I have to start with Rosa Tang, Dr. Rosa Tang. She's a neuro-ophthalmologist up in Houston, Texas. And she was the founder, one of the pioneers with Dr. Jade Schiffman of the first teleophthalmology interest group, which at that point in time was called the ICOP Consortium, late 90s. She opened up my mind, and she's always been there. She's always been guiding me. I would say Dr. Rashid Bashur, considered like the pioneer, together with Dr. Jay Sanders, considered the modern fathers of telemedicine here in the States and the worldwide. They were always there to give me kind of like the right advice, the right things. Dr. Dale Alverson, one of the former ATA presidents, the American Telemedicine Association's president, dear friend of ours. We even did telemedicine with my third baby. He's an expert in his field. He's a neonatologist. And then I would say my former boss, Dr. Robert Zaldivar in Argentina, he was a very visionary person, and he was always about the experience. With him, I learned it's all about the experience. It's all about the patient, and we're both video addicts, if we want to say that. And everything for us is through a video. So you say that an image is worth more than 100 words. I think the expression is in English. Well, for me, a video is worth more than 1 million pictures. Because you get it all in video, right? You can feel the emotions, you can see the background, you can do ethnography, you can understand where the person is actually. And then Dr. Alfonso, obviously, Dr. Alfonso has been also a key visionary, and I really, really appreciate not only him having been able to recruit me, but being able to be side by side and looking as he looks to the future. So I've been blessed to be with pioneers, and I have many colleagues. I mean, it would be unfair to have to name them all because we be here a lot. Because I do have a very, very large network.
It's always tough when I ask you to name names, because you'll end this session. You're like, I forgot to mention, and you know,
Dr.
I know how that goes.
Dr. Eduardo Mayorga is another one. He's an ophthalmologist. He's been one of our pioneers in e-learning. He's done so much for e-learning internationally speaking. He's traveled all around the world training the trainers. He also gave me a new perspective. So again, yeah, it's
great.
been a
And listen,
journey.
you also, and I talk specifically about your professional career, but I know you talk lovingly about your family, which is one of the most endearing qualities about you. So it's wonderful. And we talk about you grew up in Argentina, right? So you've had an international career from Argentina to the U.S. So sort of pivoting, and we pride ourselves here at the University of Miami of being a global, a global center for education. I wonder, if, like, how has your experience working across continents influenced your vision for virtual care, for ophthalmology, for sort of your professional career?
So two things. First of all, if it weren't for video, it would have been very difficult because we've always been separated with my family because of my traveling and so forth. And I have 3 kids today, 29, 24, and going on 20. And video has always kept us united. It has always kept us together, regardless of where we are. Video conferencing is just part of our family lifestyle. And that's important, right? And so now I'm going to bridge that with the question that you specifically asked about different countries. I think there are 2 main things that may hinder being successful in trying to change the paradigm of healthcare models or how we deliver and how we increase accessibility to healthcare. One is cultural appropriateness, and the other is governance. And so when you have that chance to be able to travel, to see, to talk, to network, you understand the cultural differences of each country and each region, which may sound like obvious, but it's not that obvious, because sometimes what for me may be obvious from a video perspective, someone's like, no, video, no, they get too intimidated. No, I'm just going to rely on audio. And so how do you actually leverage off the right technology for that right place in time, right? And in time, because again, 30 years ago, we weren't even thinking what happened in less than 3 months in 2020 was going to happen, right? So cultural appropriateness is so much important. I mean, I have experiences of working with local, I would say, shamans, which are the Indian or tribal witch doctors or medical doctors, all the way up to health ministers, right? So it spans, right? So from a culture perspective, and governance. Unfortunately, I think that technology evolves so fast. I mean, it grows exponentially, right? Our capability as a humans to adapt isn't exponential. It's curved, but it isn't exponential. But governments, it's kind of like, it's reactive. It's not proactive. And I've seen that around the globe. And so, although I do say and emphasize that there are countries that have learned, whether it be before the pandemic or during the pandemic, that e-health should be a policy because it does help us address issues in equity and accessibility. And in these countries, for example, they're investing heavily in universal connectivity. And you would say, what does connectivity have to do with it? It has to do with everything. 'Cause today, it's a social determinant of health. If I'm not on the grid, if I can't communicate, if I can't get access to my healthcare, to my information, or just to be able to get research to learn more, how can I change my behaviors, my bad habits? How can I improve? How can I get access to better health? So there are countries that have understand that. Others have an easier task. Others have a more difficult task. But at the end of the day, it's about being able to help us design a framework where we can all offer services in health that are safe, are reliable, that we're in a secure environment, and that we feel confident in doing. Because if you don't feel confident because you feel you're at risk, because you're liable, because you're accountable, because of your license, your credentialing, what type of reimbursement are you going to get reimbursed? Or maybe, these are hot topics, right? Maybe you're getting paid less because you're just doing a virtual consult and you're not doing in person. Yet I'm treating you the same way I would if I were in person and that,
Sure.
But I'm virtual. I mean, I may not be able to touch you, but my knowledge, my know-how, I'm still liable and accountable for it. So
yeah, it's interesting. We talk about, you mentioned that you may not be able to touch you, as we make certain, technology advances and even in haptics, as we talk more specifically about VR and AR. I guess one of the questions I'd love to get from you is, in terms of your research or just your field, or just generally VR and AR, what are you most excited about in terms of the future discoveries as it relates to VR, AI, and AR?
Obviously, how artificial intelligence is going to play into this and what the role it's going to have and everything else is obviously something that I'm very interested in looking at. But I'm a very, very, once again, experiential person. So I'm really looking forward to, one, hands-free, no controllers, be intuitively working, which I already know is there, but for ophthalmology and for some things is still just not there. And as you said, haptics, to be able to feel it. So far, everything, I wore my first haptic gloves in 1999. And I'll tell you, they're pretty much the same things I just saw at the last conference I've been here. So although technology has evolved and those that build can actually crucify me for what I'm saying, but from a user perspective, they're still cumbersome. They're still too, I don't know. I was a surgeon, right? So I love things that are delicate, that are very thin, that are kind of like intuitive and kind of like seamless. I would say it's a seamless expression. So as technology evolves, I'm hoping to be able to get that, right? Because being able to feel the same things, to hear, to see as a human person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if you're a surgeon, right? But even though if you're not a surgeon, it's, and I'm just touching the surface, can I really get that same experience, that same feeling? Because that's what the immersive and the pervasiveness allows us for, right? It allows us.
This is a common theme when we talk to medical professionals. Like we work here with, the nursing school here at the University of Miami, and we're doing a lot of work in VR, but inevitably they can't wait for the haptics to just get a little bit better. And as you said, like it's we're moving. That's one area that's sort of moves slowly. It's a little bit more difficult in terms of how you operate. So I appreciate that. So listen, this has all been good. So I always like to end these. I'd like to end this podcast with sort of a fun, silly question as it relates to VR. Okay, so yes. I'm gonna hit you with it. So if you could use VR to sort of instantly transport yourself to any place in the world for like a quick break, where would you go, and what snack would you take along with you for the trip?
Oh, that's an easy one. I would teleport myself right now to the gallery at my house in the backyard. I have a beautiful gallery back in Mendoza, Argentina. We're in the hills. It's kind of like the Napa Valley here in California. Mm-hmm. And I've got all the Andes right in front of me. I can see kind of like the frosting on the cake, all the snow year round. And there's a famous ridge right where we are, where all the paragliders go every weekend. And so you see all these beautiful colors just flying around in front of you. And then I would have my Nespresso. and the snack would be what we call alfajor. And I'm not going to say brand name so I don't get into trouble, but it would be my alfajor, which is kind of like a chocolate cookie with dulce de leche in between, which is kind of like a caramel here. That's my favorite snack and my favorite coffee, and that's my place in the world.
That sounds fantastic. I might come and have a glass of wine. Sounds like the region. Yeah.
I'll have a nice Malbec for you instead of a
wine and cheese would be great. Well, listen, thank you. Listen, this has been fantastic, eye-opening. I really, really appreciate your time. Gigi, Dr. Ricoeur, thank you for being a pioneer here on the UMverse podcast, and we look forward to hearing from you more soon.
Thank you, Tom. And once again, these are exciting times. I'm so happy and blessed to be part of it. And I think this is this, right? We're cross-pollinating, we're sharing ideas, we're sharing experiences. And as you bring more people on board, I'm sure we're going to have so much to learn because I keep on learning every day. So I'm thankful for everybody. And on behalf of Bascom Palmer and Bascom Palmerverse, thank you so much for having invited us to be your pioneers.
Thanks so much. We'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.